working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Just about half past the hour here. And for today's activist agenda, we're doing a little feature that I like to call Reefer Research. And that's when we take a look at the different government and statistical and scientific websites that are out there, providing all of the information you need to make your point in any particular drug war argument. And for today's Reefer Research, being that there's so much talk from Kevin Sabet and the Project SAM people about Rehab, I thought we'd look at the Rehab statistics from the treatment episode data set admissions. This is called TEDS A, and it's recent up to 2010. And what got me on this had to do with a tweet that I saw that Doug Benson was on the Adam Carolla show with Dr. Drew, or on the Dr. Drew show with Adam Carolla. I don't know exactly how it went down. But anyway, Dr. Drew, Adam Carolla, and Doug Benson are all together. And I tweeted out, Doug, run before Dr. Drew puts a bunch of heroin in your trunk and then calls the cops. This references back to a tweet war that I had with Dr. Drew directly. He had a statement in Huffington Post where one of the times Lindsay Lohan got in trouble, he said, if I were her father, I would load her car up with a bunch of Schedule I drugs and then send her on her way and then call the cops to get her pulled over so she'd get busted so she'd be forced into rehab. Yeah, so I was just referencing that. Anyway, it got me to thinking about rehab, and that led me, once again, back to the Substance Abuse Mental Health Data Archive, or SAMDA. You can find this, well, it's a tough link, and I think I've got a short link to it through my Rad Russ facility. I'll put the long link in the chat room right now if people want to follow along. But this is where you can find all of this information, and we'll put it up on the screen as well for you from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Archive, or SAMHSA, which is the government agency that controls these statistics. And here we go. Let's see if I can resize this, make it a little easier for y'all to see. All right, so SAMHSA, there we go. Get that just about the right size. All right, so this is the Mental Health Data Archive, and from here you can choose different selections like the Drug Abuse Warning Network. This is the stats on emergency room admissions based on drugs. Health behavior in school-aged children, National Survey on Drug Use and Health. That's probably the primary one you want to look at. That's all of the statistics, who uses how much, so forth. But here it is. Here's the one we're looking for today, the Treatment Episode Data Set Admissions, or TEDS A. And when you open that up, you'll find, the list of all the surveys going back, through all the years. We're just going to pick the most recent, the TEDS A for 2010. Now, when you get to the TEDS A for 2010, there's these different sections of the page that you work with. And in the top left is your variable selection. On the right here, what's going to go in your rows, columns, controls, and so forth. Now, this is difficult when you first get to these things because there's not like a help file that gives you this nice guide as to how you plug things in and what to do. Everything I've learned about this TEDS database I've gotten just from poking around in it and trying to figure out how it works. And it helps a little bit that I have some background in database stuff. But right here in this bottom right corner, and let me get some of the graphics out of the way here so that you can see better what I'm trying to pull off. But right here in the corner, you can see the different variables that are available. They look like a set of books. And the books just represent the different subjects. And there's one subject here that says referral sources. And within referral sources are two variables called P-source, principal source of referral, and DETCRIM, detailed criminal justice referral. Now, you come upon that and maybe you have a clue. Maybe like, well, principal source of referral, that kind of sounds like why they got put into rehab. And it actually is. And there is a help up here. If you can look in this help to get some of these details. But I usually find that the easiest way to figure these things out is just plug them in and see what comes out. For example, what is P-source? Well, if I click on P-source, it'll put it, it's your bladder. That's the P-source. No, when I click on P-source here as the variable, you can then copy that to row, and that'll move it over to the row section here. You only have to have a row. That's the bare minimum. You don't have to put anything else in. You just pick P-source here to try to what the hell is P-source? Let's figure this out, right? And if you scroll to the bottom, there'll be a place, run the table, and the data will appear. And what this is telling us is that for the row, using the variable P-source, which stands for principal source of referral, there's a range of 1 to 7 that can be. And when you scroll down, you find out what those things are. A code 1 is somebody who refers themselves to rehab. A code 2 is when a drug or alcohol abuse care provider is sending them to rehab. And so forth. We have other healthcare provider, educational or school, employer EAP, other community referral. Those can be, community like YMCAs or whatever, anything in the community that might refer someone to rehab. And then finally, court, criminal justice, DUI, DWI. Now, when we just pulled just this one variable, we are pulling the variable for everyone who ever went to rehab in 2010. This is for marijuana, for coke, for heroin, for LSD, for alcohol. If they went to rehab, this is what sent them there. And what we discover is 36.9% of the people who ended up in rehab were put there because of a court, criminal justice referral, DUI, or DWI. They got in trouble with drugs under the law, or alcohol, DWI, right, under the law. About a third of the people in rehab, more than a third, 36.9%, are in rehab because they were forced there. And about a third, actually almost exactly a third, 33.1%, are there because they referred themselves. They decided they had a problem and they went on their own. For the rest of this little demonstration, we're only going to compare the individual self-referrals to the court criminal justice system ones. And the reason I'm doing that, because the court criminal justice ones are the ones that are forcing you to rehab. The individual ones are the ones you're choosing to go to rehab. The rest of these are somewhere in between. Now, if your employer is sending you to rehab, maybe you're choosing to go to keep your job. Maybe that's not much of a choice when your job's at stake. Let's not even worry about that. Let's consider about a third of the people in rehab are there because they went on their own. About a third of people in rehab because the court sent them there. All right. So if that's what we're going to do, let's go back to our treatment episode data source. We've got the P source. We know what that is. That's what sent you to rehab. Now we'd like to know what drug got you put in rehab. And if you scroll down in this bottom left corner and you find these substances of abuse, there's original variables and there's created variables. And all these variables have to do with what substance were they using, which way did they, route of administration, they shoot it, do they smoke it, frequency of use, age at first use. And I'm not going to take you through those because through time, for time constraints, I just found that they weren't very useful. But within substance of abuse created variables, we do find some very useful ones. All of these variables that end with FLG are flags. They are binary yes-no type of things. And they are, did they report alcohol? Did they report cocaine? Did they report marijuana, heroin, non-prescription methadone, opiates or synthetics, PCP, hallucinogens, meth, amphetamines, stimulants, benzodiazepines, etc., 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 right? So any one of these drugs, it's either a yes or no that person's in rehab for it. But there's a problem. There is a problem, and that is because you could go to rehab for multiple drugs. You could go because of alcohol and marijuana and LSD for that matter, right? Now, you might just be the drunk. You just might be a drunk who happens to use pot or acid from time to time. But as far as it gets coded in the database, you've got a problem with all three, right? So we got to narrow this down a bit. We can't just say, whether or not you were in for marijuana, because you might have been put in for marijuana and heroin. Well, you really probably have the problem with heroin. But there's this nice one right up here, num subs. And that stands for the number of substances that were listed when the person was admitted. Now, where this becomes useful is you'll find this button here that says filter. With num subs, I can click filter, and it puts it down here in this selection filter area right there. And there's parentheses, and you can put a number in there. Well, we want just one substance. People that were put in rehab just for marijuana. Here's what we're going to do with this. Let's take marijuana flag, MARFLG, marijuana reported at admission, and we'll put that in the column. And then let's take P source, what sent you to rehab, and put that in the row. And that fills in our little variables here, right? Our rows are going to be why you went to rehab. Our column's going to be you're in for marijuana or you're not in for marijuana, true or false. And there was only one substance when you went in. You're not a multi-drug addict. You either went in for booze or coke or heroin or marijuana, right? And with all of that, we'll come down here. Now remember, when we did this for just everybody in rehab, it was about even. 1/3 went to rehab for self-referral, 1/3 went there because the court forced them to. Run this table, and here's what you get. For column on the right, substance reported. This would be people who went to rehab for marijuana and only marijuana, because there's only one substance. 13.6% of them are self-referrals. 55.6% of them are criminal justice referrals. And we can compare that to people who didn't report marijuana. That would be they're in rehab for something other than pot. That would be drugs and alcohol, drugs or alcohol. 36.2% sent themselves. 36.0% were referred by criminal justice. So that balance overall of 1/3 sent themselves, 1/3 went there for court is the way it is for every drug and alcohol combined. As you know, people that did not use pot, it's a 1/3, 1/3. People who did use pot, it's a 1-5. For every one person there who went on their own for rehab, there are 4 who were forced there by the criminal justice system. Now, if that doesn't shake your foundations a little bit, how about this little change? If we put debt crim up there, debt crim is the variable that tells you if you were sent there by a court, what was the court sending you there for? The result there, 44.6% are there for a probation or parole violation. That generally means they were caught with weed while they were on probation or they tested positive on a P-test. Compare that to the non-marijuana column where it's 26% busted their probation. The stats are all there. Email me, russ@radicalruss.com if you need some help with them. I'm here for you. When we come back, time for a radical rant. We're going to tear down Project Sam.